and sending all education and education work and needs back to the state.
While in many cases, wait a minute. First of all,
we spend more money per pupil by 3 times than any other nation, and yet we're absolutely at the bottom.
Okay.
We're one of the worst.
Stop. Fact check.
People that in many cases hate our children, we're going to send it all back to...
Stop it. Stop it. Hate our children? That's wild work, Mr. Trump, President Trump.
My life's work is to end the U.S. Department of Education.
Who is this guy?
They do not care about kids' education, and they truly do not care about kids' souls.
Who is this guy? What did he call it? Let me go back. Adopt the latest
LGBT craze.
LGBT craze? That's not on the Department of Education, my bro. Get over it. That's... I understand. Let me slow down. I understand how simple it is to put it all on the Department of Education. So I'm not mad at you because it makes it bite chunk. It's a amuse-bouche, right? It's something you can eat in one bite. So I get why you're doing that, but it's just not true. So, you know, I'm calling cap. You can't see me. I am going to do this. My mentor says, just record, bro. Just do it. Just go with it. So I'm just going to go with it. This is my inaugural reaction video. And we have a conference about the closing of the Department of Education. My community has been so generous about sending me clips. And so I'm going to react to the video clips that I've been receiving as it relates to the various aspects of the Department of Education. And we'll see how it goes. Okay, pray for me. We're going to see how this goes. Here we go.
And one other thing I'll be doing very early in the administration is closing up the Department of Education in Washington, D.C., and sending all education and education work and needs back to the state.
Okay, let's talk about that. All education needs back to the states. I don't have a problem with states' rights, but I do think there are national issues that need to be properly addressed. Pushing it all to the states, while in many cases, wait a minute. First of all, all feelings, no facts. I would estimate 80 to 85% of all the decision making that goes on in any one particular school or in any one particular state is handled locally. The vast majority of education decisions are made within the state already. Okay, I'm gonna leave that alone. Let's keep going.
Because they'll do a much better job of it. You can't do worse. We spend more money per pupil by 3 times than any other nation, and yet we're absolutely at the bottom.
Okay,
we're one of the worst.
Stop. Fact check.
See,
how does the U.S. It's not a well-written prompt. Per pupil spending on education compared to other PISA nations. So PISA is the international organization that provides data on student readiness across nations, right? I don't exactly remember what it stands for, but they take, if I'm not mistaken, 15-year-olds and give them all basically the same test, or it's normed in some sort of way. And then that's what allows for the ranking to be compared. So according to GPT, the United States invests significantly in education compared to other nations participating in PISA, which stands for the Program for International Student Assessment. Okay. On average, U.S. schools spend about, let's call it $20,000 per student, ranking as the second highest among the 40 developed countries. Okay. So he's for Trump, he's alarmingly accurate, right? So I'll give him credit. Then when we look at outcomes, let's ask about that. Where does PISA rank the U.S. on its measures? I don't know if that's a good prompt either, but I think GPT will figure out where I'm trying to go with this. Okay, well, let's see what GPT has to say. PISA 2022 gave some results here. It says that we are 6th place in reading, 10th place in science, and 26th place in math. There is a decline in math. Reading is stable, making progress in science. Okay, so from a fact check perspective, it sounds like while he's not exactly accurate, it would be fair to say that we are spending a whole heck of a lot to be an average nation as it relates to our education of our kids. All right, let's continue.
We're one of the worst. So you can't do worse. We're going to end education coming out of Washington, D.C. We're going to close it up. All those buildings.
Hold on. I'm triggered here. We're going to end education coming out of Washington, D.C. Now, let us be clear. I started my career the same year that President George W. Bush, representing the Republican Party, implemented the No Child Left Behind Act, which was a national curriculum, set of curricular standards, if you will. So shout out to the Republican Party because they were the ones that nationalized these curricular standards in the first place. So the fact that he's throwing shots is wild work to me.
All those buildings all over the place, and you have people that in many cases hate our children. We're going to send it all back to
Stop it. Hate our children? That's wild work, Mr. Trump, President Trump. I can't even get into it. I have a problem with that, but I'm a mark it up as a Trumpism and not even consider it a strong statement, but just charged language.
It all back to the states. Thank you very much.
All right, you're welcome very much. Okay, I don't know how this reaction video thing goes. This is my first time doing it, so I appreciate you bearing with me. We're going to move on to the next clip, and I'll see how this goes in the editing bay.
And President Trump has been saying this too. What the left gets right about Project 2025 is that we call for the utter elimination of the U.S. Department of Education.
Okay. We call for the utter elimination of the U.S. Department of Education. That is strong language. And I, at the time, didn't even know if that was possible. So then I was afraid that it was possible, right, with just a signature. But in fact, it's more complicated than that. And when you talk about advanced American politics, I believe it's almost impossible to actually do that. Is more than a notion. And I think what he's offering is a bunch of hot air. To dismantle the Department of Education is more than just a sentence. So let's keep moving. I don't think that's really worth responding.
Anything to do with school choice, but also separate from school choice, we're going to take the Department of Education, close it. I'm going to close it. We'll have one person, could be you if you decide to retire.
Okay, Mr. President.
He be like that though. Could be you type shit. Yeah, Trump be like that. You know, we're going to talk at some point. I'm sure I'm going to talk about who he is tapped to be the head of the Department of Education. Wild work. But it was probably in one of these sort of aside conversations like, hey, you'd be great for the job. So.
Here's what
bothers me about that. So let's say you have a liberal city, let's Los Angeles, San Diego, and they just decide we're going to get rid of that history. We got new history. This is America built off the backs of slaves on stolen land. And that curriculum comes in.
Then we don't send them money.
And then we don't send them money. So there's a couple things that I want to unpack here. I hope I'm doing you guys a service. Keep in mind, because I may have to come back to this, what if a state does what you say? It decides what its own education for its population should look like. He says, if it's something that I don't like, I'm going to hold the purse. I'm not going to send them money. It is the same, if I can over talk for a bit, is the same problem that I see with DEI. And I have a conference coming up on diversity, equity, and inclusion and its fate in education. So we're going to talk about that more later. But there is this conversation about the trend of DEI in the nation, right? It started real hot when George Floyd was murdered by a police officer. It was Black Lives Matter was a big thing, and corporations got on the Black Lives Matter bandwagon, and they gave that Black Lives Matter organization a whole bunch of money, and they got the branding deal and the whole bit, you know, really big money shifts. But then we started to see commercials. They made sure that there was a pan shot and a cameo of somebody in a wheelchair, or they made sure if it was a life insurance commercial that there was a Hispanic man and a black woman that was the married couple, or an Asian woman and a white man, or however they did the dynamics to make sure that they had the corporate diversity, equity, and inclusion pieces there. And some of it still lingers. We saw it in hiring practices. We saw a real emphasis when it came to university admissions, etc. But it's been long enough, says the party, and it's time to move all that DEI stuff out of our lexicon and go to merit, pure merit-based decisions. And I'm interested to see how that conversation goes. So stay tuned. There will be more to come. I will say this. I need to start integrating these calls to action. So I'm going to try to get your thoughts on some of these clips down in the comments below. So feel free to jump in if you're so inspired. All right, let's check out the next clip.
It's a fight, though.
It's a huge fight. There's no other way of putting it. My life's work is to end the U.S. Department of Education.
Who is this guy? Who is this guy? I've seen him a couple times now on closing the Department of Education, and I'm curious about who is this guy, the Kennedy on the Tim Kennedy on the Kevin Roberts show. So Tim Kennedy, Google that guy for me and put something in the chat so that I can figure out who this guy is. But clearly he is somebody worth bringing on to a podcast, and he is very passionate about closing the Department of Education for some reason. I'm gonna have to take this one back. Let me start over and stop interrupting him. Let me let you speak, sir.
It's a fight, though.
It's a huge fight. There's no other way of putting it. My life's work is to end the U.S. Department.
My life's work is wild.
I'm not going to stop until it's gone.
Like, I argue they do not care about kids. They do not care about kids' education, and they truly do not care about kids' souls.
Who is this guy? Kevin Roberts? Oh, I got to get more research. I don't know who these guys are. If you know, please let me know in the comments. Drop me some links so I can do some more research and maybe dive deeper on these guys. Okay, I think it's time for me to reveal some of the things that I've learned about the Department of Education. First of all, let's keep in mind, the Department of Education's job is not to care about our kids. So there are 4 major mandates of the Department of Education. One is federal student aid. So the federal government gets about $250 billion. It has a portfolio of about not quite $250 billion that it uses in federal student aid. And that federal student aid comes in one of 2 major forms, either by loans vis-a-vis FAFSA, if you're familiar, and then the Pell Grant, which is specifically earmarked for low income. Under the Pell Grant can include things like low study, work study, and under the loans you can get subsidized and unsubsidized loans. Then it has Title I. Title I means if you're in a school that has low income, then you also have fewer resources. So the Department of Education sends extra money to those schools that are under-resourced in order to educate American children, right? American students. Next, you have the Office of Civil Rights. So if there are problems in education that violate a student's civil rights, then where do you go? You can go to the Office of Civil Rights under the Department of Education. We see it in particular under Title IX, which prohibits sex-based discrimination in schools. So they can get funding for sports programs. They make sure that there is no discrimination based on sex. And then finally, the Department of Education enforces the IDEA Act, right, which is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or I think that's what it's called. Basically, its job is to protect students who are differently abled to ensure that they have access to the least restrictive learning environment possible. Okay, and there's a whole lot more details that I won't get into in this reaction video, but there's plenty that I want to say just to dispel a lot of myths about what the DOE is. But the DOE, the idea that DOE hates your kids is wild work. That's not even the nature of their function, to hate kids or to love kids, right? It's to make sure that they get equal access so that the individual, I think it's called the ILA, the LEA, the local educational agency, whether that's the school or the district or the charter or whatever, that local institution has the opportunity and can fulfill its duty to make sure that every student under its charge gets equal access to education. Okay, I'm over talking here, but this idea that they're supposed to care for our kids' souls is wild work, bro. Like that's not the place for that. The DOE ain't the place for that. Put that somewhere else. I think it's important, but DOE not where that belongs. Okay, let me move on. Let's move on.
Ideologues have captured our schools and they have indoctrinated our kids. They haven't just mistaught them American history. They've taught them to hate it. Run for...
Oh, goodness gracious. Now here, I heard something sweet, and I actually want to try to get into this. This Mr. Tim Kennedy is probably far smarter because he's responding not to the guy's question, but he's laying an argument which I think is really quite sophisticated. And if you're not in tune with the jargon, with the language of education, you might miss some of this. So let's get into this, right? So the dude says they truly do not care about kids' souls. Now, what I like about Mr. Kennedy here is that he sidestepped all of that because, like me, it don't belong in this issue about Department of Education. Now, what he said, though, is ideologues are doing this thing, right? So he's not even pinning it on the Department of Education, but that it's in so close proximity to this guy's question about our kids' souls that it's a very clever straw man argument, right? Because it's not a real argument. But what he says actually is not. I don't have a real problem with it. Let me listen to it again, and I'll see. Ideologues
have captured our schools.
Have captured the schools.
Indoctrinated our kids.
Kids.
Mistaught them American
Misteaching American history and
Run
hating
for your
it.
City council.
Now, this is the part that I got excited about. Fine. Ideologues have captured our schools and they are indoctrinating our kids. Who are the ideologues? That's the mysterious they that we hear about, right? It's the non-person. But then he gives this advice, and I'm with you, my non-brother. Run for your city council.
Go to school board meetings, ask hard questions. Those are ways that, quote unquote, we can vote. In other words,
yes, and yes, my man, we on the same page now. But what he's saying is to make change, it's at the local level. Go to your school board meeting. Ask those tough questions. Run for a school board seat, right? These are the things. And that's where the change happens at the local level. This is the whole mission of the educator's house. It's this idea that we, the frontline educators, are the ones that are going to improve education nationally. It can't come from the top down. It must come from the bottom up. And what we do at the house is we bring together these frontline educators, the parents of school-age children, community members who are concerned about our kids. Let's bring them all to the same virtual online space, all to the same table so that we can cross-talk and challenge each other. If you're not familiar with it, find out about Educator's House and tap in because we got a lot coming. We got a lot of feet we're going to put to the fire. But let's continue. Who's next?
What are your personal opinions on President Trump's plans to deconstruct the current Department of Education and give the power back to the states? And what can you say to people, children, to comfort them about this announcement that he's made?
To your first question, what would I say? I guess I would say, zippity-doo-dah, zippity-ay, my, oh my,
what a wonderful day.
That'd be the first thing I would say.
Okay.
And to the parents who are concerned, I would say, plenty of sunshine heading your way. Zippity-doo-dah, zippity-ay. That's what I would say. The Department of Education has been a complete failure. It's not only been a huge waste of taxpayer money, but it's one charge, which is to make students smarter and better educated. It's completely failed at over its 40-plus years of existence. Test scores have gone down. It's really good at forcing local schools to adopt the latest LGBT craze or whatever, but it's not good at much else. So I say good riddance, bye-bye Department of Education, and I tell parents your kids are going to get a much better education as a result of it.
See again. Okay, this is what I'm learning is the through line here. The right wing, I'll call it, I'm assuming that's what he represents, has problems with the state of education. So do I. But what it's doing is it's outsourcing those problems to the Department of Education, which I think is totally wrong and inappropriate. Politically, it's simple, right? So for a classic American who is really not into education, the institution of education like I am, it simplifies it all. And you can just throw it on the Department of Education, but that's not really where the criticism belongs. All of this indoctrination, woke, what did he call it? Let me go back. Adopt the latest
LGBT craze.
LGBT craze. That's not on the Department of Education, my bro. Get over it. That's, I understand. Let me slow down. I understand how simple it is to put it all on the Department of Education. So I'm not mad at you because it makes it bite chunk. It's a amuse-bouche, right? It's something you can eat in one bite. So I get why you're doing that, but it's just not true. So, you know, I'm calling cap. Let's move on to the next one. So let me go into a
when you look
listen
at
and
the
pause.
Department of Education across our country, teachers make about $50,000.
I would say that that's about right, right? In some schools, I have made less, and in other schools, I have made more. So on average, I would say that across the course of my career, I probably averaged about $50,000 a year. So yes.
A year. The median salary for a Department of Education employee is $110,000.
Okay, I don't have a big problem with that. I know some CEOs of very small charter districts that make $250,000 a year. You could probably find a principal in your state that makes about $110,000 and they work at a local school. So the idea that you have these national career civil servants that are making that doesn't bother me much at all.
They make twice as much as teachers, and they've never taught math, they've never taught reading, they've never done any of those.
Now, here's what's funny about this statement. He is being critical of these DOA bureaucrat civil servants who haven't taught, who haven't been in the classroom, et cetera, et cetera. But our girl, Linda McMahon, I don't have the details. So let me make this the next call to action. How much education experience does Linda McMahon have? Full stop. I don't think it's much. I could be corrected, but I want to say it's something like 2 years of substitute teaching work. It's like auxiliary at best. Okay. So I'm not going to sit here and let him get by with talking about these civil servants who haven't spent their career in the classroom without saying that the lady that he's promoting as the head hasn't spent her career in the classroom. Like, get out of here, dude. Get out of here, bro. Let's continue.
Those things. Meanwhile, for every dollar the Department of Education brings in, only 20 cents actually go back to the classroom.
Okay. This is another talking point. And factually, he might be true, but this is where I'm actually engaged in this business statistics class, right? Because I really want to be serious about content creation and getting into the education content creation space. So rather than treat it like a passion project, I really want to treat it like a business. So I'm looking at how do I measure statistically the health of my business and use these measurements to figure out where I need to be going as a business, right? So with that being said, one of the very first chapters that we got into was this issue of misleading data. That's what this is. This is some misleading data. So let's get into the numbers. I have some notes about the numbers since we're talking about it. Okay, let's look at the numbers for the Department of Education financials. First of all, according to the number of employees in any one department, the DOE is the smallest by size. But from 1980, when it got started under President Carter, it had 3,000 employees and a budget of about $14 billion. Now, 2025 under President Trump, it has 4,000, round 4,400, 500 employees and an operating budget of $82 billion. Okay, that's what it uses. When I look at it from a relative perspective, this $82 billion operating budget represents a less than 3% of the entire federal budget. Okay, so it is not, when you hear talk about how much savings they're going to make by eliminating the Department of Education and how much more efficient they're going to make the government by doing away with this, you're really looking at making an impact on less than 3% of the budget. If you were to eliminate it altogether, which is wild work, what's most likely going to happen is those duties are going to be pushed into other departments, the Department of Treasury, the Department of Justice, maybe the Department of Health and Human Services. So the work will continue. It will most likely continue under the management of someone else. So it's not like you're actually eliminating anything. You're just shifting the shells around. Okay. So, and then you can call it what, for politics purposes, you can say that you did something, but really you just move people down the hall. Okay. So from a size of the office, it's the smallest. From the size of the budget, it's really quite small at about 2.5% of the entire Fed budget to operate.
20 cents actually go back to the classroom. The rest is eaten up in bureaucratic costs. So this is one of those departments that needs just a huge reform and makeover. It needs to be downsized tremendously, and a lot of the things they're doing need to be sent back to the states. That's actually the state.
I want to get into this thing about sending back to the states because there's a very nefarious plan here, and I don't have the time to unpack it today, so you're going to have to stay tuned, okay? But this idea of moving stuff back to the states is going to be wild work, and I do think the Title I recipients, the Title IX recipients, and the IDEA recipients have a huge potential to suffer without the federal government providing the kind of oversight that we may see. If all they do is data collection, but they don't have a civil rights arm and the power of the purse, it could be a problem. Let's keep it moving.
It's obligation to do those things. And that's what she's going to do, I believe. When you look at Trump's picks for the cabinet thus far, it's transformational. It's what the American people wanted. They wanted actual change, and he's delivering.
If you didn't see the clip, there's like clips of her in the Wrestling Federation.
You're going to read that book, and you're going to read it now!
But reading hurts.
Not as much as this. You see, reading is a joy! Reading takes you to new and exciting places!
Daddy!
You can't see me!
You can't see me? Okay, that was funny. Thank you, whoever sent that. But that was funny. So I don't have too much to say about it, but very poetic work. Let's see what this next one's talking about. It was great.
Do you know what happens if the Department of Education closes? Not what you think happens. Do you know what happens? Because the Department of Education is responsible for the IDEA Act of 1975. And that guarantees a free and appropriate education for all children with special needs. If the Department of Education is closed, they are the only institution to enforce this, which means if you have a child with special needs, they are no longer guaranteed a free and appropriate education in its least restrictive environment. It would be wise for you to ask questions to your school board, to your legislators in your state to find out what their plan is to carry over the services and education of your child if they have an IEP or a 504 plan. Food for thought.
So yes, old boy was cooking. He's got the same problem I had with what it means to actually close. I honestly, I don't think it's going to close. But our job, if responsibility is going to shift to the states, then it's our job to pressure the states. And that's something that we haven't been doing enough of. So let's move on to the next one.
One proposal Trump and his supporters have put forward is to abolish the Department of Education. What will it mean for parents and families if these funds disappear in states all over the country?
Well, first of all, let me just be very clear. He is not going to close the Department of Education. This is going to be just another empty campaign promise, like building a wall, like having Mexico pay for the wall.
Okay. This man knows. This is Arne Duncan, the former U.S. Secretary of Education. So this guy was the Secretary of Education under Obama, whereas Linda McMahon is going to be the Secretary of Education under Trump. I'm with you, brother. I'm with you, sir. You're absolutely right. He is not going to close down the Department of Education. This is a bunch of hot air and politically charged rhetoric to keep his base energized. But no, ain't no way functionally that I think this can happen. Let me let him continue to cook.
Another place where he betrays those who follow him and where they choose to hold him accountable or not. So it would be devastating. But I can guarantee you right here, that's not going to happen. He doesn't have the power to do it. There are over 7.5 million children across the country with special needs, with disabilities. And the department provides multiple $billion to help those children get the education they need and deserve. And last time I checked, Reverend, children with disabilities aren't just the children of folks who vote on the Democratic side or folks who vote on the Republican side. All of our children have challenges. Yeah. And again, if he somehow chooses to take on those families, he's going to pay a very, very steep political price, and he'll back right away from that as quick as he can.
Shout out to what's the Reverend Al Sharpton? Shout out to him. You look great, old man. You still in the game? Fine looking suit, for the record. It would take an act of Congress to authorize him to reorganize the federal government. And the last time this was authorized was our boy Reagan. And even though he was authorized, the savvy politicians of Congress gave him the authority, but as a caveat, they had to get congressional approval to whatever changes he made. And the chef's kiss to all of this was when they gave him the approval, these Congress persons went on recess for like 85 of the 90 days that he had to try to get this thing reorganized. So that even despite his best effort, he only had 5 days to actually get it pushed through Congress, which was not ever going to happen. So even when they authorized the president, they found a way to dismantle him or to pull the teeth out of that tiger so that no change could really be made. So in effect, he ran on this, Reagan, he ran on closing the Department of Education. It was one of his talking points. And his Congress authorized him, right? He got the power to do it, but then they all went on recess. And so he never actually implemented any of the things that he was authorized to do. So it was very, very sophisticated politics. There may be something like that here because he's got the House, the Republicans control the Senate, and the Republicans control the executive branch. And some could say that conservatives also control the Supreme Court, right? So there is a powerful check and balance component where they all are kind of in alignment. But I can say this, a state senator is in one way or another beholden to his voters in that state. And if these voters get up in arms about the fact that, according to the counter narrative, the funding for their special education students is going to go away. The funding for the low-income students is going to go away, and they're going to privatize student loans. And so you won't be able to get access to guaranteed low-interest loans in order to pay to invest in your own college education. Now, those are biteable chunks. That's an amuse-bouche that will piss somebody off. And to try to recounter that narrative is going to be complicated, right? The whole phase-out plan and the states and the too many moving parts. So on the one hand, there's this nutshell. It's all the Department of Education's fault. Let's dismantle it. But when they start doing that, there's going to be 3 easy things that will counter that. 3 little bites. Your students with disabilities are going to suffer. Poor students and their families are going to suffer. And college-going students are going to suffer. It's a no-win situation. Ain't no way that I can see a pathway where this could happen. Now, if he gets authorized and he does what I've suggested earlier, moves the Fed stuff over to, the financial aid stuff over to Treasury, the civil rights stuff over to Justice, and the Title I and maybe the SPED stuff over to Health and Human Services, then maybe, right? And he could call it a dub. So we're gonna see. That's what I'm gonna put my money on. All right, let me move this along to the next clip. Let's see.
And lastly, brothers, all of us are fathers, well, most of us. We have sons, we have daughters who we hope and dream one day will go off to college. But what if that college that they go to sent you a tuition bill in the mail saying that you had to pay this by Friday? And that tuition bill is $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 a year. Would you be able to just stroke a check and pay for that flat out? Probably not. But thank goodness we have the U.S. Department of Education that helps our students of color fund their education through programs like the Pell Grant, through work study, through even federal student loans that are affordable repayment plans. That's all funded through the U.S. Department of Education. But that orange guy you support, yeah, he wants to do away with the Department of Education. So what happens to the loans? What happens to all these student aid programs? They go to the private banks. Those same private banks that were guilty of predatory lending, those same private banks that refuse to lend money to people of color, those same private banks that caused the housing collapse, you want them in charge of funding your child's education? Bruh.
Bruh. That was a great final word. He's nailed the head. He hit the nail too. These two brothers, the brother that was talking about the IDEA Act and this brother talking about the DOE and private funding, you know, they get their part of the pie. I think they got something here. So yes. Now, so here's my response. One, Trump's Department of Education has a difficult task because what Biden did was send out a whole lot of rhetoric and did this kind of false start about non-repayment of the student loans or some kind of loan forgiveness thing around COVID time, something. I didn't qualify. Excuse me. I'm so sorry. I didn't qualify for that. So I didn't really look into it because I knew it didn't apply to me. But apparently some people got their loans forgiven or whatever, like they didn't have to pay it back. And it made it into sort of the national zeitgeist, right? The national consciousness. So Trump's thing is, hey, we got to get you guys back on the payment plan. So to get people who think, whether legitimately or not, that they don't have to pay this back and then try to get them to pay is going to be a challenge. So Trump has a challenge that he's facing with the repayment situation of student loans. So I have to have compassion for the department for that. To dismantle. Now, my thought was that this effort of student financial aid would fall under the Department of Treasury, but I think he's given me another point of view. If he really wants to eliminate all of those positions from the Fed altogether, then outsourcing them to private institutions is definitely a way to do it. These are the organizations that manage the student loans. And they are also, limited in how much interest they could charge. They have limits on the conditions of who qualifies for subsidized loans and who qualifies for unsubsidized loans. A subsidized loan means that the federal government will cover the cost of the interest on that loan while the student is still in school. They don't manage under those same rules, and it does go private. Ooh-wee. The stuff that he talked about is actually really real. You know, if these private banks who have done some irresponsible things with money in the past end up managing this $250 billion of a portfolio, you know, however they split it up. Yeah, that could be a mess. I don't recommend that. I don't think that's a good idea. Even if I'm a trumpet, as they say, I might have to get fired behind this one because my man, what do you call him, the orange guy? Nah, I don't know. I'm not big on that. Now, I'm not big on privatized prisons either. And I know I'm digressing a little bit, but we see how that went, and it's not good. I think the prison industrial complex, call me crazy, but if the prison industrial complex fell under federal governments like other countries where all prisons are public institutions and not privately held, I think our prison system would look very different as well. But they have a for-profit motive to keep prisoners. But let me not go into that. Okay, I'm going too far. Let me just move on to the next clip before I get totally triggered here. Okay, let's see what this one is about.
Almost 80% of our students are underprivileged.
What kind of poverty are you talking about?
I would be confident in saying that when they leave on Friday, they may not eat again until Monday.
The elementary and middle school principal is Jennifer Blankenship.
You are acutely aware of money. Oh, acutely aware of it. Do you have to be acutely aware? You do.
Every year of her 28 years as an educator here, Blankenship fought for every dollar for her kids.
How much of this room is funded?
The entire room.
A third of all of Bell County, Kentucky school district funding in 2021 came from federal sources. So this district is listening as incoming President Donald Trump pledges this.
One other thing I'll be doing very early in the administration is closing up the Department of Education in Washington, D.C., and sending all education and education work and needs back to the states.
What exactly that means for a state like Kentucky is unclear. Trump won this state. In Bell County, 84% voted for Trump, yet it deeply relies on federal funding. And that's not unusual. A CNN analysis found the 15 states that most rely on federal funding for its public schools in 2022 all voted for Trump.
And I voted for President Trump.
I mean, you're an educator. You
Yes.
didn't vote for Trump eliminating federal funds
No,
here.
I did not vote for that. I voted for President Trump to make America first again and to improve our lives.
Do you believe that he would cut funding for this county?
I want to say in my heart, absolutely not. I do not think that's what the voters want. If we have federal cuts, then that's going to mean bigger classroom sizes. I would lose teachers, first and foremost. It's devastating for this school.
Stop. I can't respond. That's too much for me to unpack in the time that I have left because I got to get up out of here and go pick up my son. This one is wild work. Wild work. I have to leave it. If you have something to say, please comment below. Okay, I'm going to stop it there. I don't have no cool, sexy outro or intro. This is just my reaction to some clips. Call to action would be send me clips. If you got any interesting clips, send them over to my educators.house on Instagram. That's kind of where I'm housing my clips. Even if it's a YouTube clip, you can just copy and paste the link of YouTube into that inbox. And that way I can have them all centralized in a single spot and figure out how to pull them together. Hit the comments. Let me know your thoughts. This one ran long. I don't want to do too much editing because that could take me 4 or 5 additional days to try to get it just right. So I may do a few big cuts, but this one's going to be long and I'm going to try to cut it down as I develop my skills in reaction videos. So keep that in mind. And what else? I think that's it. Thank you. If you happen to watch this and I'm out. Peace. Oh, geez. Stop this.